Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we are going to talk about the 6th round of the X2o Badkamers Trophy in Hamme. I'm joined by my usual guests Twan and Issam.
Hello.
Hey everybody.
As said, the 6th round of the X2o Badkamers Trophy took place in the city of Hamme, not the old parcours. If you follow cyclocross for a longer time, you might remember that we raced in Hamme-Zogge, but since Golazzo took over the organization of this cross, the course moved to the city center of Hamme, a technical parcours but also quite some straights. Issam will tell us how that went down in the men's race.
In the men's race, we were awaiting the return of Tom Pidcock, who returned from a training camp in Mallorca, a couple of weeks that he was there. But he missed a little bit his start, was not really at the front from the beginning. Someone that didn't miss his start was Aerts, together with Corné van Kessel, and also in the beginning of the race, Felipe Orsta was at the front. Van Kessel and Aerts will have difficulties to maintain that pace, however Aerts will not. Aerts will have a gap of around 20 seconds, and in the first 3 laps it looked like it was going to be a solo from Aerts. Behind that, it is Eli Iserbyt, Laurens Sweeck, and a little bit more struggling Michael van Toerenhout. Pidcock then finds his rhythm in the halfway through the race and then gets to the guys of the Pauw Sauze with Eli Iserbyt and Laurens Sweeck. Aerts is fading a little bit halfway through the race, and then we have a group of 4 guys with Tom Pidcock, Laurens Sweeck, Eli Iserbyt, and Toon Aerts. Pidcock then in the last lap puts the others under pressure, goes into a corner a little bit too fast, crashes, and then his chances of a victory are gone. The victory then is a battle between Toon Aerts and Laurens Sweeck. Iserbyt is not going to be able to catch the 2, and in the end it's going to be a sprint to the finish line. Only one wheel. But one wheel was enough for Laurens Sweeck to get the victory in front of Toon Aerts. His first victory after the race in Leuven.
What a final part of the race. It was just amazing to watch. I definitely enjoyed it. I think we're definitely up there with Besançon as one of the best races of the season. Sweeck taking his first victory, as Issam said, since the ATS cross in Leuven, first classified cross of the season. What do we make of his victory? What do you guys think was key to his victory today?
I think he was maybe, he was the one that was not having a lot of issues, a lot of mistakes were not really made by him. I think Aerts in the beginning of the race had that gap and was a bit forced to a faster start and a faster opening of the race. I think that might have cost him a little bit towards the end of the race. Iserbyt didn't really come into the race. He was trying to do his thing, but it was just not... he was just not really there, and Pidcock was having a bad start, came to the front and was looking to get his victory in the last lap, but then had that, that crash, and, for him it was then over, and Sweeck did everything right, was leading into the last corner, and then in the sprint he had just enough to be in front of Toon Aerts.
Yeah, I think Sweeck rode a strong tactical race today as well, just keeping the race controlled for a long time and just pushing at the right moments, and especially choosing his position very well for the final sprint.
I think in the end of the race that was the main difference between the win for Sweeck or a second place, but I think in general, if we look at the bigger picture of the race, we were the week before the World Championships, and I could see it today, and it's something that's common. All the riders who were at the front were busy with the race next week. They all said, with maybe exception of Iserbyt, that they weren't, that they were here for today and focused on today. But in my opinion, you could see that the others were busy with next week's race. For Sweeck, maybe a bit less, because he's not considered to be one of the biggest favorites, because he hasn't had the best season. But you could see Aerts, he waited in the middle of the race. In normal conditions, he would have continued there. Iserbyt, well, he was just sitting back and waiting all race. Van der Haar had a very cautious start and then came forward through the race. I think he was also busy with next week. We saw Pidcock, also not a great race. Van Toerenhout quickly sat up after a crash. Van Kessel also at some point either faded or just sat up. I think that all the riders who think they can get a podium next week. We're busy with it, and that also includes Pidcock. We'll speak about him a bit later, but do you guys think that all the riders basically at the front of the top 10 were busy with next week?
I think it played a role, but for Aerts, in my opinion, it was just a very fast opening, and maybe then also at the back of your mind, you're gonna be like, well, if I'm just going to push more and more, and he's completely in the red, then it's not going to work, and it will cost you more time to recover, and then less time to focus on what is coming up, and what's coming up is more important. I think for Sweeck, there was not really a moment where I think looking into the last few races that he has done, this is definitely a little bit better than the others. So I am assuming that he was pushing for victory. And I think for Iserbyt, he was riding with the World Championship at the back of his mind. But when he had the chance to maybe go for a podium or victory, you saw in him that he was trying to get to the front again. So I think everybody had it like at the back of their head for like a 10% or something, but I think there was one guy that was really having the World Championship at the back of his head, and that was Pidcock.
I don't want to get too much into a preview. We have a preview podcast coming up for that throughout the week. Then we'll go into details of who we think will be the best and stuff. But if we purely focus on today's race, I want to say a last thing about the World Championships. Don't look too much into the results of the favorites today, and you can better look at the performances, and that's what struck me with Pidcock. In the beginning of the race, Pidcock had a relatively slow start. That was mainly down, in my opinion, due to the fact that he started on the left side of the road. That was the right side on the screen. He needed to take the outside line through the bend right after the start. He dropped a couple of positions, but he was not in a hurry. His first lap was 7 minutes 1, which was relatively slow. His second lap, in the beginning of his second lap, he let a couple of riders past him. He wasn't bothered that Venturini passed him. He also wasn't bothered that Lokes passed him, or Aerts, or at some point I think also Tom Meuse passed him. He was just sitting back, waiting a bit. Second lap, oh, not too bothered. I'll see a bit here, I'll see a bit there. And then comes the part which really showed to me, okay, Pidcock has the form. He is in great form. No problems with adapting to the race rhythm again after being, I think, 2 full weekends without racing. So I think what I saw there in lap 3, 4 and 5 of the race, I saw Pidcock putting in laps which were around the same time as the last lap of the race, which was the fastest. He was only 1 second slower, but he did this 3 laps after each other. And he was overtaking riders during these laps. He was overtaking them left, right and center, was in control, pretty smooth on the technique, except for one corner in the what they call the bike park, which was the final section of corners before they came to the start-finish straight. And based on that, I do think that Pidcock was the best rider today, certainly in control. At the end, he started to play a bit. I think he had a crash and then sat back a bit, and he took a gel, and then the commentators were thinking he went bonked and didn't eat enough. But then he came back to the lead until he made that crash. But to me, Pidcock made a very, very good impression.
Yeah, I really like the look of Pidcock. It did seem a bit like he was holding back and just not entirely happy with everything that was happening. But I did look very solid pace-wise, so it looks good for World Championships. And yeah, just very unlucky with that crash. Yeah, I just was too eager to put the pressure on, and it cost him.
Do we think that without that crash, Pidcock would have won the race?
Easily, without a doubt. There's not a single thing that thinks that in me that thinks that he wouldn't have won if he stayed up and he didn't crash in that corner, because he was, in my opinion, and that was the impression that he gave me, was that he was riding with 90%, that he didn't really bother. In the last lap, when it really mattered, he was at the front. He was closing gaps quite easily. He was lapping faster than the ones in front, while they were racing for victory, and he was just chasing. I think that the Pidcock that we have seen today, and maybe also tomorrow, is going to show us that it's going to be very difficult for the Belgians to do something at the Worlds. But For today, 100%, Pidcock was the strongest.
And I think even if he starts that sprint in third position behind Aerts, it's quite an easy victory for him. He has that sprint speed as well. So yeah, it was just he really threw away a victory for himself there.
Yeah, to me it looked like Pidcock used a bit too much front brake in that corner, and then, well, in combination with a bit of a too high speed, it's easy to slip away there. It's a very slippery corner, the one where he crashed. He was also using the Grifo tire thread, if I'm not mistaken. Iserbyt was on the Reno, so that also explains a bit of a lack of grip. So very unfortunate. I think he could have won without that indeed. I think, however, that now that Sweeck wins, also for Iserbyt and Aerts, that's not necessarily bad news for them. The Belgian media in the weeks before the World Championships, and especially after Hogerheide until the big event, is on a full hype train to hype any Belgian that they think has a chance, or even if they know that they don't have a chance. And now, because Sweeck won, Aerts and Iserbyt can escape from that pressure and media circus in somewhat, I think that they can somewhat escape and that they can be a bit more relaxed in their approach. And in terms of Iserbyt, his approach to today's race also seemed very, very relaxed. I think he was also not really going all out today.
Yeah, totally agree on that. I think that is a good conclusion, because also with tomorrow we're going to see that there are going to be some that maybe gave a little bit too much today and will be like, well, I'm not really going to give it my all in Hogerheide, and I will just sit back a little bit more and try to save as much energy as I possibly can while not ruining my result completely. And that's why it's also a bit difficult to take notes of these races, but impressions can always be given. I think that Aerts, especially when he and Sweeck were away and had a small gap, he didn't really try to make that gap bigger, and I think he definitely could. And with Iserbyt it's the same thing. When Pidcock went on the ground and crashed in that last lap, Iserbyt was then all of a sudden able to try and fight a little bit back to the other guys. But this is also parkour where it's very hard to close a very small gap, because it's quite fast, despite the fact that there are some tough sections and some mud. But it is still fast in overall, and that makes it very difficult to come back to close a gap. And I think that's tomorrow also is going to be very good race, and very nice to see what the riders are planning to do. And I'm only looking forward to the World Championship, because we have some good riders.
But about that, when Iserbyt at the end of the race still decided to see what he could do, I'm interested what you think about that, Twan, because Iserbyt, in his pre-race interview, he said, today I'm here to do a bit of sandbagging, I'm not too serious here, I just want to test my legs a bit today, but I'm not going for it. People were searching things behind that he was riding with arm and leg warmers today. And throughout the race, like after the race, Iserbyt also was saying, yeah, I'm happy that Sweeck won. I wanted to just see how good I was. Well, I think I proved myself. But at the end of the race, he was still trying to go for that victory until he made a mistake. And in addition to that, his team manager, Jurgen Mettepenningen, during the broadcast said the team wanted Eli to skip this race, but Eli insisted that he would start here. So what do you make out of the Iserbyt situation at the end of the race?
I think it makes sense, especially in like the last weekend before the World Championships, to go maybe like a little bit warmer than you usually do, just to make sure that you don't catch cold and stuff. And like I understand, I had the feeling that like Aerts, Pidcock, and Iserbyt indeed, like all three of them were fine to like race it out on the final lap for victory. Like if it wouldn't come too easy to them, but indeed you can just make one mistake and then it's just completely over, and it looks like he didn't really do too great. But I mean, if he says he feels good toward the World Championships, I guess we have to take him at his word, and we'll see what happens tomorrow, of course, in Hogerheide, and then in Fayetteville in a week.
Iserbyt definitely gambling on the World Championships in the last couple of weeks, but by the fact that he already won 13 races, the World Cup, and is comfortably leading the Super Prestige, he is also in a position that he can do so without it compromising his entire season. Let's look at our entire top 10 then. Laurens Sweeck took the victory ahead of Toon Aerts and Iserbyt. It was the first win of Laurens Sweeck since the 13th of November, so that's quite a while ago, more than 2 months. Just off the podium we see Lars van der Haar ahead of Tom Pidcock, Michael van Toerenhout, Corné van Kessel. 8th place went to Tom Meeuwse ahead of Clément Venturini in 9th and Toon van der Bos in 10th. Kind of the usual suspects in the top 10. I do however want to mention the name of Lars van der Haar. This is another rider who was busy with next week. He said that he was going to focus on getting in a rhythm here. He says he's always bad after 1 week of training, and that was shown today, or at least he was satisfied with his result. It was what he expected. However, a name that we do need to mention here is the one of Clément Venturini, ending 9th here. What do you guys think of his performance today?
Yeah, I think not bad at all. Definitely, if you compare it to the last results that he had done, I think Flamanville was not really impressive, but was also not really bad. And today he missed the start a little bit, or at least he was around with Pidcock at the start. So considering where Pidcock has come from at lap 1, but yeah, well, definitely not a bad result. And it seems, for me at least, that he is growing a little bit every race. Every race he gets a little bit more rhythm, more feeling for the bike as well, and more feeling for the overall. Just in the race you can see it is looking better and better on the bike, and it's going to be interesting to see what he can do in the next World Championships.
I think for Venturini his race calendar is just a bit too short. 6 races is not enough to be pure peak at the World Championships. Still think he has a shot at getting a top 10 though, but a bit more racing, starting a bit earlier instead of only in January, could help him. But I think he did a good job, and it was interesting to see him battle it out with Turner, Aerts and Sweeck for the final place in the top 10. Also, Toon van der Bos was around there, but Van der Bos has kind of become a usual suspect at the back end of the top 10 this year. Let's then talk about the women's race. That was not as interesting as the men's race, but nevertheless, Twan will tell us what happened.
It was a very quick start by Alvarado, but Brand would overpower her toward the field, and she would take first to the field as well, and she would quickly open up a gap. A very quick first lap. Betsema was able to catch up with her, and we would see a bit of a sprint for the bonification seconds. Then the pace dropped. Shirin van Anrooij and Annemarie Worst were able to return, as well as Bakker and Alvarado, but they wouldn't be as relevant anymore. But in lap 3, Lucinda Brandt would go once again. Denise Betsema would try and chase very hard, but she wasn't quite able to close the gap, and Shirin van Anrooij would have to help her out at some point as well. In the end, it was the world champion once again winning. Lucinda Brandt in first place, Shirin van Anrooij in second, beating Betsema in the sprint for indeed that second place, further for Denise Betsema.
This means that Lucinda Brandt, after losing more than 2 minutes on the Koppenberg, now leads the X2o trophy by, if my calculations are correct, it was 21 seconds. Betsema, however, still not out it, still 2 races to go. But Brandt today, simply the best. Any conclusions on her race from your side?
I think Brandt is just on excellent form. Maybe not as great as some points in the season, but it's just she still has that 1% over everyone. The question is just how good will Vos be at the World Championships, I think, rather than Brandt, because Brandt has just been solid today. Very controlled in the race. It didn't look like she went all out either. Just taking the lead today in the X2o trophy, and basically taking that and saying we'll see more next week.
Yeah, I think Brandt just was the best today. Combination of power and technique was on point today once again. About Betsema, for the first part of the race, I actually thought Betsema looked lively. I thought, Betsema finally took a weekend of rest. and it looked good. And then at some point, like, she made that mistake on this hill where she got stuck in the mud, almost closed the gap on Brand again. But then Betsema it looked like something snapped and it was just done for Betsema. And I don't know, I feel like for Betsema it's once again a solid performance. But again, it's not quite what I was hoping for, because in my opinion, a course like we have today is almost a perfect Betsema course.
Yeah, it's definitely not a parkour that is not suiting her. This is definitely something that she can handle quite well. And I would say that I had a bit of the same feeling in the beginning of the race, that I was like, well, it seems like that rest period is paying off and that it looked quite well. And it was still an okay performance today, but it was just clear that there was just one a little bit stronger. And then in the end that she was not able to get by Shirin van Anrooij, who, by the way, was riding a very, very strong race. That, in my opinion, proves a little bit that it was a result where she cannot look back on and say, well, this was very good. But again, we don't know what she has done in the last few weeks. What was the amount of training that she has done? You know, they can always play a factor if it was a little bit harder training camp or just the week in general, if the intensity was a little bit higher. It's not going to be very easy to show it immediately, the true shape in the first race. So we have to wait and see if that is going to improve, but it's definitely not a very good impression and something you really want.
The only thing I can say, it is for Betsema also the first time in a long while she takes rest. This can break up her rhythm. And if your rhythm is broken up, well, it's not necessarily bad for the Worlds, because she has this weekend to get back into her rhythm. We know from Betsema she doesn't need a lot of racing to get back into her rhythm. But what it can indicate is that the fact that she skipped a weekend of racing means that she now misses this race feeling, and that is something that you can see in the lap times, because for Betsema, at the end of the race she faded a bit, but in the last lap, for the motivation for the second place, she could get herself in a rhythm again and go deep and get a good lap time in. Perhaps the fact that she didn't race last weekend meant that she, for the final phase of the race, was kind of struggling to find out how to go super deep again, and that came back a bit. That's something that can be an indication. It's something that other people indicate as well, that they experience that after going on a training camp. So perhaps that's something that was the case for Betsema. I don't think that this will change anything from Betsema, her status at the World Championships. In my opinion, she will be the third favorite. But for Van Anrooij, however, what do you guys think about that? It's a great performance. Do you guys think that based on this we will be speaking about Van Anrooij as the top favorite for the World Championships, or in general maybe a comment on her race?
Well, I have her as a top favorite, and I think that the way she's riding with the elite is super strong. She's taking an initiative when possible, is not shy of going at a higher pace than she's used to, and I like that. This is a really nice way of riding, and today was a very strong race overall. She's having a very good season, obviously already having a title with the European Championships, and for the Worlds it's looking better and better, and obviously the race still has to be done, but in my opinion definitely maybe even the main favorite. But obviously you have some more women that are able to have a shot at that first place, so a bit hard to say, but definitely going into that race with more confidence than the other, maybe.
There was a part in the season where I wasn't so confident in Van Anrooij. I wasn't even so confident that she'd ever make this step and that she'd continue to do like cyclocross as the main thing. But I think she has done an amazing Christmas period. She's pulled it through into January, and she's put herself in a position where it's really going to depend on the day and how the parcours is of who is going to take the title. And all three of them have a great shot at the world title there.
I think that might have been a bit of an extreme never making the step, but yeah, I agree that in the middle part of the season it just didn't look as good for Van Anrooij as it does now, mainly down to a lot of bad starts, and now she's worked on that and it looks to be going the right way now, and she's at the top of her game. Will it be with more confidence into the Worlds? I don't necessarily think so. We shouldn't forget that Van Empel won 2 World Cups this year. And then based on that, it makes sense that we look more at Van Empel and Pietersen, because they have been at the front of our screens week in, week out. Van Anrooij is choosing a different program, taking a couple of longer rest periods and also just not being in the picture as much. But yeah, today a very strong race. Again, for Van Anrooij, it just looked to me like Van Anrooij is a younger version of Brand. Her technique is a bit better. For now she lacks a bit of power, but the way she cornered today, it just looked good, and the power sections were also there. Only thing on her race, was it smart for her to in the last lap pace that much with Betsema in her wheel? Or should she have let Betsema do the pacing, considering the general classification position of Lucinda Brand, her teammate?
Yeah, I didn't love that either. I imagine Sven Nys will just briefly mention it at some point. It isn't too big a deal because at the end of the day, I think Brand feels quite confident in her chances to keep the classification as it is from here on out. But yeah, it's just a small detail where you can play the team card a little bit more, which just makes your own race easier as well.
Let's look at our entire top 10 then. Brand taking the win and also the lead in the classification ahead of Van Anrooij and Betsema. Just off the podium we see Worst ahead of Alvarado and Bakker. 7th place went to the first non-Dutch rider Sanne Kant ahead of Marion Norbert Ribeiro. 9th place went to Aniek van Alphen, and the top 10 is rounded off by Anna K. Out of this top 10, let's focus shortly on the riders just outside of the podium, Worst, Alvarado and Bakker. For Worst and Alvarado, I feel like the story is known, both struggling this season, both having issues with their back. For Bakker, we don't know what she has been struggling with this season, but today was a strong race again by Manon Bakker in my opinion.
Yeah, seems like it's, some days off, but it's definitely getting better than, with what she started. And that's only good to see because, she's a young prospect, someone that is a little bit in the shadow of the other under 23 women, but she's finally, getting it a little bit on the rails and performing better week in, week out. And today was no exception. She was riding quite well in the beginning, faded a little bit, then had that small sprint with Alvarado. But overall, very strong ride from Bakker.
I think the rest of the top 10 is nothing too special, except maybe a better result from Aniek van Alphen than in recent weeks. But outside of the top 10, 11th place for Marie Schreiber, just a first year under 23 rider. I think that this young girl from Luxembourg also put in a very strong ride. She was at the front of the race for a while, I think 3rd or 4th place. When Alicia Frank caused that crash, she was able to take a good line past it. Dropped back a bit, but still, 11th place. Schreiber, I'm not going to say that she's going to get a medal at the Worlds. Under 23 category is very strong. But if she has a good day, a top 5 is definitely possible. But a top 10 is almost, I think she should be able to get that.
Yeah, good ride by Schreiber's, was well placed in the beginning of the race and then just kept it going and ending 11 just outside of the top 10. Definitely not a bad result for someone that young. Also someone that was having a good result around the same age. Zoe Bakstad coming back from a COVID infection. The recovery seems to be all right and only 13th, not so much behind Schreiber. I think that is also a very solid result and hopefully she can put that line forward towards the Worlds.
Yeah, strong performances by these young riders. Also another junior, Julia Kopecky, strong, she ended 17th. And now we're talking about young riders. There were separate races for young male riders, unfortunately no junior women's race today, but men's under 23 race was won by Joran Viseuren ahead of Cameron Mason and Gerben Kuipers. Pim Ronnaar ended 4th after having a mechanical issue, and even earlier on the day there was the men's junior race. Just like the entire season almost, David Haverdings took the win ahead of Jordi Corses, and the third place went to Aaron Dox, who had a crash in the last lap. Well, I think we've covered it then for the X2o trophy in Hamme. Twan and Issam, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
We will be back tomorrow with a podcast about the World Cup in Hogerheide. Should be an interesting race, fingers crossed. And after that, next week there will be more podcasts coming up. A preview podcast for the World Championships and one where we talk with 5 riders who will be racing in the World Championships. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for more. Goodbye.